afternoon, everyone. Today, after an enchanting session by Professor Sarvamani on the Thinai culture, we will move on to our second session for the day on Gleanings from Sanskrit Society and Poetics by Professor J. Sreenivasa Murthy. The session will be moderated by Dr. Sreenivasa Kumar N. Acharya. Dr. Acharya is an assistant professor and heads the Department of Philosophy at MAHE, where he oversees an interdisciplinary research project, MAHE Mahabharata Computational Analysis using Sanskrit Computational Linguistics in Digital Humanities. He pursues teaching and research in Indian discourses on ethics, epistemology, metaphysics, and linguistics. Over to you, Srini.
Thank you, Medini. Welcome, Professor Dr. J. Sreenivasa Murthy and Professor Dr. H. S. Shivaprakash and others. First, let me glean over a quote of Dandi from his Kavya Darsha. Idavanda tavah kritsnam jayeta bhuvanatrayam yadi shabdah vayam jyotirāsamsāram nadīpyate. All the three worlds would become blinding darkness if the light called word were not to shine forth to the limits of creation. Aesthetically speaking, the spellbinding term or concept, word, shabda, is mesmerizing. What is shabda here? Indian philosophers have their own versions of shabda, it being the smallest unit of a spoken language, dhvani, or written language, lipi, or the character varna, or the word pada, or the sentence vakya. But for the artists, poets, playwrights, literators, critics, connoisseurs, and aesthetes, it is the art that is shabda here. Shravya audible or drishya visible. Both make noise, sound. Shabda. How come visible is also sound? That is left to the audience to unravel the enigmas of Shabda. The world would have been benighted completely if the word had not enlightened it. Such is the mystery of Shabda, the only tool that humankind has to explore the past, present, and future of us and the universe. In this regard, it is important for us to gather and look through the gleanings from Sanskrit poetry and poetics. The lecture will be delivered by Professor Dr. J. Sreenivasa Murthy. Professor Dr. J. Sreenivasa Murthy taught Sanskrit for 4 decades in MES College, Bengaluru, active in Kannada theatre for 5 decades as actor, stage worker, script writer, concept designer, and producer. He is also a well-known critic and translator. He has translated Majjhima Nikaya from Pali to Kannada and the writings of saint poet Kanakadasa from Kannada to Sanskrit. His scholarly interests include Sanskrit poetics, dramaturgy, Buddhism, and Tantra. He has been a visiting professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, New Delhi. He has lectured at many conferences, presented papers, and contributed book chapters for several publications in India. I request all the audience to write down their questions, then post them also with your full name and city, and even at the end of the session. Keeping time in mind, we will be able to permit you to interact directly with the scholar or read them out one after another. As told by our colleague Medini, we are working on Mahabharata. So my friends who are Sanskrit scholars present here, Dr. Arjuna, who teaches literature, aesthetics, and linguistics, Dr. Ananda, who's conducting research in Mahabharata, and Vidwan Gautam, who teaches Sanskrit language, or our Sanskrit studies and Indian philosophy students also may be having specific questions, as this is the session of their interest in particular. Professor Murthy, we are waiting to listen to you. Over to you, sir.
Pranamya Shirasa Devau, Pitamaha Maheshwarau, Natya Shastram Pravakshyami, Brahmanaya Dudakritam. This is how the Natya Shastra begins. You know, Natya Shastra is the work or the first work on Indian art as such because Natya is inclusive of almost all the art forms we can think of. And the very important thing is that the salutations here are to Pitamaha or Prajapati, that is Brahma, and then to Shiva. These two are also the persons from whom the entire Natya Shastra, in a sense, the entire study on aesthetics also begin. And this was taught by Brahma himself. Very interesting thing here is that Brahma is the creator and Maheshwara is the person who absorbs that back, who dissolves. And these two together are responsible for all the arts. And it is taught by them. They create art, they teach about the art, and the art that is created is again dedicated to them. And this is a very important issue here, that what is meant by art is but a kind of creation. The person who created, the creator, Brahma, himself creates the Natya Shastra and teaches it to Bharata and all others. The person who dissolves everything, the person responsible for the Laya, because Laya has two different meanings. The Laya, Karta, Shiva, he is also the God in the beginning. Seemingly opposite two things, that of Brahma and the Shiva. It is a work which is continuously happening, and that makes for the order of this world and the order of the art. And so, when we speak of ethics and aesthetics, one is supposed to be against the other, or seemingly they are different, they are opposite. But the Indian way of looking at the order is in the dynamics from this seemingly opposite poles that the entire order is being made. I'm thankful to my great friend, Professor Shiv Prakash, and my friends in the Manipal University that they have asked me to speak about this, thereby asking me to think about this. When I say think about this, it is actually theorizing certain things. But sometimes as theory and sometimes as a flash, these things have appeared in different forms in a large number of Sanskrit words. And you know, Sanskrit words mean many, many things. But even within that, within the poetry, starting from Valmiki and Vyasa, up to our own times, we see that there is a concern of this creation and recreation. And this creation of the world, that has an order. And that order is coming down to us at several levels. There is the cosmic order, which is called Rita. And because of that cosmic order, we have the world order, we have the space and the time is being divided into seasons, and the seasons into the months, and those months wherein there is the mark made by the movement of the sun and the moon. And this order has an influence on the people, on all creatures, on the life force as such. And that is in keeping with the order, the cosmic order. There is the life order. But the life order has certain obligations. It has certain amount of give and take. And we all go not merely by the time that is already there, but we fix times. For example, we fix the time that we start this at 2:30. I'm sorry, by 2 o'clock, and I'm sorry that I was late. What happened? I was not able to keep up an obligation. That disrupts, that puts people to worry. Then we start adjusting ourselves. Each of us have our own problems, but we try to accommodate one another, and we keep up to this time. We are late by a few minutes, and the time that we have lost cannot be regained. So there is Ruta, the cosmic order, the world order. Within that, the life order. And then we have certain obligations to fulfill within this. And that is the Runa that we have. Runa is an obligation to another person. And to pay that Runa, we have certain ways. We do certain things. We keep up certain discipline. We are supposed to keep up certain discipline. We are supposed to do things expected of us. And we also want to do certain things which we expect. And in this working, there arise conflicts. It's not just that we want to do just one thing. We want to do several things. And those several things, they start conflicting with each other. And we find some order to hold these things together. And therefore, we make rules. We have regulations, which are in keeping with the nature of the things. And that is the dharma. Because we all know this definition of dharma, dharana dharma uchyate, and so on. But how does it hold together? Dharma also means the nature of certain things. And that dharma is in our performance. We work, and there is that karma. And karma, every action, it produces an effect. And therefore, through this karma, the doing of things, we have our intelligence, and we say, this is the order. If you do this, such and such a thing happens. And that is an order. And all these orders, they are not exclusive of one another. They are in a telescopic way. They are one within the other. And therefore, Professor M. Hiriyanna, who wrote his work, a monumental work, Indian Conception of Values, in the last 2 chapters, he deals with these 2 very important values. One is the ethical value, and the last one, the aesthetic value. Taking the clue from there, I would like to to address the issues which have been raised from yesterday, starting from our scholarly friend, the poet, Professor Shiva Prakash, followed by others like Manu Devadevan, and today in the morning, or Tamil professor. We have seen these various thinking as to what is happening in poetry or what is happening in art in general, and what is happening to the order, to the law, to the values, which we broadly call the ethical order. Now the main problem here is in seeing them in opposition to each other, or seeing that one is above the other. No, I beg to submit that they too are part of the same order. It is like the two opposite spokes of the same wheel. And you know, these concepts are not static ones. They are dynamic. And therefore, when we speak of dharma as the basis of ethical order, or dharma itself as ethical order, we should know that dharma is always symbolized as a chakra. It is dharma chakra. And even when Buddha taught his dharma, it was called dharma chakra pravartana. And this chakra, this wheel, it has these two spokes. One is the ethical order, the other is the aesthetic order. Or one is the ethical value, the other is the aesthetic value. And great poets have always been taking up the ethical questions and posing them in front of the people and telling that what you think is as the ethics, is it the ethics? Is this the order? Is this the right thing? If everything is decided as this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, there is no life at all. And also, we have a tendency to go towards the beautiful. But again, what is beautiful, what is not beautiful, is a very problematic question. Because what seems to be beautiful may not be beautiful. What seems to be ugly is not really ugly. There are no absolute standards of good and bad, of beautiful and ugly. But in exploring them, we have two parts again. One is that of the creator, and the other one is the one who will experience that. So it is again the relationship between that Brahma and Shiva and ourselves. Again, between the poet and the connoisseur, or an artist and a connoisseur. Connoisseur, I don't know if it is the right word. Again, from yesterday, we have been speaking about the Sahridaya. And this Brahma's spouse is Saraswati, the speech goddess and the goddess of all art. And Abhinav Gupta says, Saraswatyaha tattvam kavi sahridayakyam vijayate. This Saraswati tattva is glorious. Being in the Saraswatyaha tattvam kavi sahridayakyam. On one hand, it is kavi, on the other hand, it is sahridaya. And Kavi as creator and Sahridaya as the person who receives it. They have the creative ability. Both have the creative ability. And that creative ability is a recreation. So the poet recreates certain things. And Sahridaya, the connoisseur, the Sahridaya will again recreate it within himself. And this creative ability goes on. And it goes on also because what has been created is also destroyed. But that destroyed or absorbed because of a laya, of a rhythm. Laya means to dissolve, as also a rhythm. And that rhythm comes from the dissolving dance of Shiva. And about the Natya, our great poet Kalidasa says, Devanamidam amananti munayaha kantam kratum chakshusham. This is a sacrifice. It has a magic. Like sacrifice, this also is a sacrifice. There in the sacrifice, it's a magic. You think of an order which is beyond what is visible, and therefore beyond our karya karana sambandha. You have a particular form in which you say, I am doing this, so let this happen. But the other experiments are rather difficult. They are not all that pleasant. But here it is also pleasant. It's a pleasant magic that happens. Devanamidam amananti munayaha kantam kratum chakshusham rudrenedam umakrutam yatikare swange vibhaktam dvitha. By Shiva, it was formed into two in himself. One as Tandava, the other one is Lasya. One is the terrible, the other one is the beautiful, or very elegant. And here, Natyam bhinna rucherjanasya buhudha piyakam samarathan. But it's not merely something out of this world. Trigunyodbhavamatra lokacharitam nanarasam drishyate. Trigunyodbhavam lokacharitam, the lokacharita happenings of the world made of the three gunas of sattva, rajas and tamoguna. It's not made merely of sattva, not merely of rajas, not merely of tamas, but all the three together. The good, bad and the ugly, the bright, the dim and the virulent, all together. All the happenings in this world, lokacharitam, which leads to nanarasam. Different rasas are produced by that, which is what is experienced. Rasa is the anubhava. Natyam bhinna rucherjanasya buhudhapi ekam samarathanam. So you have this natya, which is catering to many people of varied interests and varied attitudes. So this is a very complex issue wherein you are having a religious outlook, you are having the mundane worldly outlook, as also you have the happenings of this world, but still it is beyond this world. And you have people of different kinds, a multiple levels of dispositions. not at loggerheads, but they all focus themselves in a work of art. Because Natya is not just acting, it is acting with so many other things, all that. And therefore, in the Natya Shastra, you have musicology, dance, painting, use of colors, sculpture, vastu, everything brought in there. And literature also is a very important part of it. When I say this, starting from Natya Shastra, our friend here quoted from Dandi, Bhama. There were poeticians like Bhamaha, Vamana, of course, the great Anandavardhana, and the illustrious Abhinavagupta, and then Mammata, many others. From time to time, they have dealt on the same subject. They have asked themselves, or they have already made statements as to what is beautiful and what should be done with that. Why should we read poetry? Why should we write poetry? What does it do? What good does it do? And they have also said, yes, it is for the good of the people. It is for the good of the world. But the question here is, what is it that we are trying to find out by reading this poetry and the poetics? How is it relevant? Because time and again such questions are asked. I can very simply say that, yeah, the aesthetics is the rasa aesthetics and the ethics is the dharma ethics. But that doesn't mean anything unless I put it to force today. And therefore, I'll just take two examples and see how the ethics has an aesthetic solutions, and how aesthetics is punctuated by the ethics or the ethical order. We all know the story of Rama and of Ramayana. It has come down to us through several versions. Not only that, each poet in Sanskrit has treated Ramayana very differently. Similarly, there is the story of Shiva, which is treated by our great poet Kalidasa in his Kumara Sambhavam. In both these, the basic question of the order, the ethical order, rooted in the Ruta, Runa, Dharma, and the Karma. This is the order where there is the pallata, there is a shift in that, there is a change in that. And all that change happens because one who should have kept the order has lost the order. And how to regain the order? It's not that we regain an old order, but we will have to create a new order. And this recreation is always something new. And therefore the ideas are always new. And that happens because of that creative ability in us, which is called pratibha. Pratibha, bha is to shine. Sorry. Pratibha is to shine. And pratibha, prati, every time newly it shines forth. It is new every moment. Prajna navanamunmesha shalini pratibhamata. The prajna, which is navanava unmesha shalini, which opens up the eyes newly to a situation, that is pratibha. And therefore it is not just regaining an old order, it is recreating a new order. And this pratibha has two important things. One is that vision, the darshana, and the other one is saying that it is possible. I'm not just seeing and saying that it is so, but I can do it in this way. I can do it newly, the Kratu Shakti. And this darshana is the revelation. Yesterday, somebody asked, is there a poetics of revelation or poetry of revelation? In fact, all poetry is a revelation. All poetry is revelation. And leading to that, all thinking of that leads to it is a revelation. And Pratibha is a revelation. And when we have this Shakti, therefore it is said, only a Rishi can create the poetry. Nan-Rushit kurute kavyam, Rushishcha kila darshanat. A person who is not a sage cannot create poetry or any art, and that Rishi is a Rishi because of the vision that he or she has. And what is the kind of vision that we see? We were talking about the Tinai in the morning. We heard our professor speaking of Tinai, the nature. And what is this nature? Of course, I told you of the cosmic order. There is the concept of Ruta, from where the Rutus also come, the seasons come. And each one has a god looking after. And the business of these gods were to look after this Ruta, Rutasya Gopaha. They are the protectors of Ruta, the order. But an Asura, Taraka Asura, you should remember the word Taraka Asura. Taraka is one who protects. He said, I'm going to look after you. Why do you worry? And he started bribing these gods. And gods played into his hands. And they lost all their power. And I don't have much time. I'm sorry because I started late. I wish I was able to read a few poems. But if time permits, let me read it later. But I'll quickly go through. The Taraka Asura, he overtook the gods, and gods lost their power. And they said, we can't do anything. They have all become slaves of the Taraka Asura. That great man, great demon, he bribed these gods and he took the control to himself, and he used all that only to himself. The Rutus, the various seasons, Paryaya Seva Mutsrujya Pushpa Sambhara Tatparaha Ujjanapala Samanyam Rutavaha Tam Upasati. The Rutas, the 6 seasons, were serving the Taraka Asura like the gardeners who have to produce flowers for the sake of the king. Like our floriculture today, we don't grow flowers for the sake of the bees. We don't see the flowers blooming all by themselves. It is done for the sake of a person who pays. And so Brahma, who heard all this from the gods, went to Vishnu and said, see, look, this is what has happened. And therefore, they said, no, there is Shiva who is sitting in his samadhi. You must bring him back and see that he gets married to Parvati, who is actually the earlier Dakshayani, who was dead there and is now born as the daughter of Himavat. And you know the story, what happens. So gods all requested Kama to go and attract the attention of Shiva to Parvati. Because he was not looking at Parvati. Though he looks at Parvati, he would look beyond that. Now, there are two extremes. One is Shiva, who is unmindful of all this. And here are the gods who are caught up in this new order of the Tarakasura. And it is said that only that son of Shiva can kill this Tarakasura. And so what happened? These people thought Shiva, he should be attracted. So they sent Kama. And he was accompanied by his wife Rati. Rati means the interest. And accompanied also by the Vasanta Kala. See, again they said, whether it is time for Vasanta Rutu or not, they pushed Vasanta there. And when Vasanta entered the hermitage, everything changed. Everybody was disturbed. And how beautiful it was. Madhudvirepaha kusumaika patre papau priyam swamanuvartamanaha Shringena cha sparsha nimilitakshim mrugema kandu yata krishna saraha. There are several points which say how the entire area changed into a beautiful, the Tapovana became an Udyanavana. It became a park. And there Parvati was there. And Manmatha used his Samohanam Nama cha Pushpadhanva Dhanushyamoham Samadhatta Bhanam. He shot an arrow called Samohanastra to delude Shiva. And even Shiva was deluded for a moment. But he recognized that he was deluded. And so with his anger, he looked at this Manmatha and it was Krodha. So if Manmatha has come with Rati, instead of creating that Kama, Sringara, the Rati which should have led to Sringara, has now led to Krodha. And even before the gods would cry out, Krodham Prabhu Samhara Samhareti, Yavadgiraha Khe Marutam Charanti, Tavat Savanhihi, Bhavanetra Janma, Bhasma Avashesham Madanam Chakara. That Shiva's anger reduced Kama to ashes. So Rati wept, Shiva left, and Parvati, looking at all these things, started wondering, what is this thing called beautiful? Tatha Samaksham Dahata Manobhavam Pinakina Bhagna Manoratha Sati Nininda Rupam Hrudayena Parvati. Parvati, Rupam Nininda, she cursed her own, she blamed her own beauty. Why? Priyeshu Saubhagya Phalahi Charuta. What is beautiful is not that which is perfect order outside, that which is pleasing, that which I can enjoy, that is beautiful. Priyeshu Saubhagya Phalahi Charuta. Charuta is beautiful. The beautiful is Saubhagya Phalahi. If it gives good results, which you can enjoy, that is beautiful. Otherwise, it is not beautiful. So what is a forced order is not beautiful. It is prone to be burned. If it is not burned, one is prone to be, if it is not burnt, one is prone to be a slave to that, as the gods have been. And therefore, Parvati took to a penance. What was the kind of penance? To go through very quickly, she gave up all her royal lifestyle, went to the Himalayas, and there she performed the Panchagni Tapas. What is that Panchagni Tapas? It is just the opposite of what we generally do. When it is cold, we want a room heater. When it is hot, we want an air cooler. But on the other hand, Parvati did a penance wherein she merged with the kind of nature that was around. In the hot summer, she stood in the midst of the Agnis around her. She did the Panchagni Tapas. And in the cold season, she stood in the midst of that ice. And when the rains came, it flowed from her top to the bottom, wherein it flowed through her beautiful parts of the body, which also meant that the drops fell down from the different chakras above and her entire body changed. And Kalidasa says, Dhruvam tasya vapuhu kanchana padma nirmitam. Her body was now a body of golden lotus. You know, those lotus also refer to the chakras, other things. Yoga paribhasha is also there. Okay. And with that, she came to a position wherein she need not seek Shiva, Shiva sought her. Touched by that penance, where she was one with the nature, Shiva appeared in front of him as a brahmachari and started asking her, why do you want to love this fellow? He is so ugly, so bad, so inauspicious, so worthless. And for all that, Parvati answered. And you know, Shiva's iconography there is that he has no proper clothes to wear. If at all he wears the hide of an elephant, dripping with drops of blood, and he has snakes around him. He is Bhayanaka, he is Bibhatsakara, he is loathsome, he is terrible, and he is awful. And Parvati listened to all that. She gave the answer to all that. And finally she said, all right, let him be as you say. Mama atra bhavayikarasam manahasthitam. My mind is full of love for him. So I accept him. He is beautiful. He is handsome for me. So again, you have two opposites. The beautiful princess Parvati and that three-eyed, skull-bearing hands, going on arms, no place to live but in the crematorium. That Shiva and this Parvati, they are in love with each other and they get married. But even then, a social order is accepted. When Shiva says, well, Kritastapo bhiriti vadini chandramaulam, you have bought me over by your penance. So, adya prabhritya vanatangi tavasmi dasaha, I am your servant. She wanted to go away, thinking that it is somebody else. And the upper garment fell from her body. And this Shiva caught hold of her hands and said these words. She wanted to go away, but she could not go away. Nor could she come back. And that is a dynamic balance that you have. You have Parvati, who neither moved nor stayed. Nayayau natasthav. But all the fatigue of that penance was lost. And in spite of that, she said, no, datami bubhrutam nataha pramani kriyatamiti. My father must give you in marriage. You please go and ask my father. And of course, he sends the Saptarshis, they get married, and Shiva and Parvati they spent their nuptials for 100 years as if it was just a day. Samadivasa nishithau sanginastatra shambhoho shatamagama rutunam sardhameka nishiva. There again he speaks of rutunam shatam, 100 seasons, now in a different order. They went on as if it was just a day. And now Shiva and Parvati, they have united as Kameshwara and Kameshwari. And this is after burning that Manmatha, who was sent by gods who were actually imprisoned because that they failed to keep the Ruta order. So this is, oh yeah, I have just another five minutes.
If you would like to take a few more minutes, it's fine, sir.
Fine. Okay. So this is about the Ruta and then about the Runa and the Dharma and the Karma. We have this story of Rama, which is re-narrated many times. And Ruta, leading to Dharma, it creates a problem which is just the opposite of what has been told in the Kumara Sambhava. And there you have Rama, who has fought the great Ravana. I say the great Ravana because he was also a powerful person. And you know, there is that old story in the Upanishad where the same shiksha, the same kind of teaching is given by Prajapati Brahma. He simply said da, da, da. The gods, the humans, and the demons took it in their own way. They understood it in their way. But actually, all the three are there in everyone. The Datta, Damadva, and Dayadva. And this is another important order. And especially for those who rule, because a ruler is one who brings the order. So, like all others, he must keep with the cosmic order. Then he is the Gopa, he is the person who looks after the social order. And he must keep up the kind of order within himself. And all this has an epistemological question also. How do you know about this? Of course, there are Shruti Vakyas, there are Shastras, but they themselves are at loggerheads many a times. And how do I get to know what is right? It is only when my conscience is clear. And what is happening here is that it is the conscience which gets disturbed time and again. And that is happening in the order. And a great work of art also does disturb this conscience. And therefore, Kalidasa in his Shakuntalam says, you see good things, you listen to something which is beautiful. Ramyani viksha madhuramshcha nishamya shabdan paryutsuki bhavati yat sukhitopi jantuhu. Even though you are happy, otherwise you get disturbed. Tat chetasa smarati nunam abodha purvam. So something which you don't know is invoked, it is revoked. It is abodha purvam smarati. Bhavasthirani jananantara sauhrudani. See, jananantara sauhrudani. This sauhruda, this suhrudatva. Suhrut is good heart. Sauhrudatva is having the same kind of heart. And that is also at the root of the sahrudaya. Sahrudaya should also be necessarily a suhrudaya. So this art is disturbing, but again, this art is consoling. And this art is pointing out to a new order. And therefore, your conscience has to be clear. And then it decides what is right. And again in Shakuntalam, Kalidasa Shakuntalam, Dushyanta says, Satam hi sandeha padeshu vastushu pramanam antahkarana pravrittaya. Pramana, the final authority, is your own antahkarana pravritti. What happens in your inner conscience. Now coming to Rama, and in fact, about the entire dynasty of Rama, Kalidasa has written Raghuvamsha. And in that Raghuvamsha, he makes a statement in the beginning. These are all the people. Very great. Shaishave abhyasta vidyanam yavane vishayishinam vardhakye munivrittinam yogenante tanum chajan. They have followed the ashrama dharma themselves. And tells the story of Dilipa, Raghu, Aja, Dasharatha, Rama, Lava, Usha, and so on. But what is actually happening? In the childhood, learn, in the Yauvana, youth, enjoy the life, and in the old age, go to the forest. But what has happened? It happened only in case of Raghu. After Raghu, Aja lived in the city, died, leaving his son Dasharatha an orphan. And Dasharatha did not go to the forest, sent Rama to the forest, his young son who should have been here. And what did Rama do? Sent his yet to be born children to be brought up in the vana, in the forest. So ashrama dharma has gone topsy-turvy. That has become the new order in the entire Raghuvamsha. So in this changed order, people start questioning. And Rama knows what he is doing is wrong, but still he is caught up between two different orders. One is the order which is there told by the Shastras. He has to see that his wife, who has a bad name, should be sent away. And he sends away that Sita to the forest. In the 14th canto of Raghuvamsha, we hear that Sita is rescued by Valmiki, the author of Ramayana, and through his words, Kalidasa says, well, maybe Rama is a great man. Shurepi, Avikathanepi. He is very brave. He is a man of true words, but Astyeva Manyuhu Bharatagrajene. Valmiki refuses to call Rama as Rama. Valmiki calls Rama as Bharata's that brother of Bharata. I have my anger towards him. Why? No, he might have done other good things, but this is a bad thing. I have my anger. So here, Kalidasa, through the story of Rama, is saying that the order is changing. And when you don't listen to your conscience, there are others who will have to tell you. And in Uttara Ramacharitam, Bhavabhuti takes it forward and says, you see, in the beginning, when Rama is about to leave Sita, there is the Chitrapata Prasanga. He looks at the paintings, recalls everything. But then he takes a decision again against his conscience. He knows Sita is pure, but yet he abandons her. Later on, he knows Shudraka, who is doing tapas, is right. He has a right to do the tapas, but because the people say he will kill him. And while killing that Shudraka, he said, oh, he has the Dakshina, oh, my right hand, Sita Vivasana Patu karuna kutaste. Where is that compassion for you when you have abandoned Sita? And he kills Shudraka. And when he does all that he should not have done, finally, he repents for that. And the people's mind will have to be changed. And that people's mind can be changed by a play. And therefore, Valmiki wrote the last part of his Ramayana as a play. And that was presented. There is the Garbhanka, in which a resolution is formed by convincing the people as to what is the right thing. So here, the ethical order, a new ethical order is brought out through an aesthetic way, through a play. And the entire history of Sanskrit literature and the entire poetics can be seen through this, wherein it is actually a dynamics of going from the ethical order to the aesthetic order, and from aesthetic order to a new ethical order. So with this submission, if time permits, I'll say something which may be of interest to the audience. I'm thankful to all my friends here who have listened to me, and my special thanks are also to the great scholars who have already spoken and who are yet to speak, who will perhaps bring greater order to what has been spoken so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for such an interesting lecture. All these lectures have been overwhelming to me because, unfortunately, literature and aesthetics is something that goes over my head. I guess I'm that Pashu Bhartrihari described, Sangeeta Sahitya Kala Vihinaha. Despite attempting masters in Alankara and Sanskrit, I always feel that I have the ability only to hear and maybe an attempt to listen to poetry and poetic discourses, but having a dialogue or a conversation is really difficult for me, and therefore also appreciating and critiquing it would remain Durutopasta. Maybe it is because, as you said, it is revelation, and I'm an exception, Jnanalava Durvidagda. So it is a revelation because Kavik Karote Kavyani Rasam Jananti Panditaha Tarasrajati Pushpani Maradvahati Saurabham. Okay, now the floor is open for the questions. If anyone would like to ask, they may raise their hand and then turn on their video and unmute themselves and ask Professor Sreenivasa Murthy directly. Yes, Ms. Kanchan Gogatte. Miss or Mr.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this wonderful discourse. I was the one who was asking about that revelations. Actually, the work that I'm doing right now, somewhere I'm trying to bridge, take some clues from Western literary criticism also and Indian poetics. And I feel it is not necessarily important that it should be for that particular text. So the question I had for you that there must have been time when there was no distinction between the aesthetics, philosophy, or whatever distinction between the things. And we cannot call it allegation, but in Indian philosophy, say it is all about dharma and moksha and all. But we can look at it the other way around, that even there was the very way of living was very aesthetic. Even moksha was being looked at aesthetically. So what's your opinion on that?
That's a very good question. The general thinking is that there is no discussion on aesthetics in the Indian philosophy. That is because we have looked at philosophy in a very narrow sense of the ontological and epistemological considerations given by a few authors, maybe like Radhakrishnan or Dasgupta, Hiriyana, and so on. But if you go to the texts, especially the texts which are not very familiar to the present day writers, Abhinavagupta is actually a philosopher, a Tantra philosopher. And I speak of this Tantra as a philosophy, not merely as some esoteric practice. You have all the arts having a kind of philosophy. I don't say a kind of philosophy, as a very, very strong philosophy, where every art is taken as an upasana. It is a way. If you come to, and therefore, all these speak of a meta language. And that meta language is at the root of even the poetics. If I can explain it in 2 minutes. One is, if you look at music, music is made up of what? The sounds. But these sounds, in a particular order, in a rhythm, is supposed to lead you to that which you, that sound which is not heard, but which is there in you, the nada. You don't have a corresponding word for nada in English. At least I don't know that. Similarly, for the iconographs, you can reduce them into certain geometric shapes, the yantras. So, which is actually trying to look at the space. Or you have the two important things, the visual art and the verbal art. Similarly, in case of language, what we are speaking is the Vaikhari, but behind that Vaikhari there is the Madhyama, because of which it gets communicated. And beyond that is the Pashyanti. And this is the philosophy of the grammarians, which has been used by the great aestheticians like Anandavardhana, Abhinavagupta, and so on. So, the philosophy has two parts, and unfortunately, for reasons best known to you all, we have divided this philosophy into mere academic philosophy and the practice as a religion. But in Indian context, they were together. And in the practice, in the upasana, all the arts, they were supposed to be elevated to this level. But yesterday, Professor Shiv Prakash was saying, it is alaukika, but it is Brahmananda Sahodara. It is a step below that Brahmananda, because there you will have to do away with every order and look beyond that. And that was the state in which Shiva was. And bringing him down to this level of Kameshwara is to raise these people who are caught up in the lower order to elevate, to take them to the next stage. So, as I quoted earlier, Kantam Kratum Chakshusham. It is a kratu, it is a sacrifice. It is a visual sacrifice. As also, it is an art that is very primitive and yet very modern. And therefore, you show me one place, one religious center which is without an artistic space. The sculptures there, place for dance, music, and all this. You see, it is speaking of an order, the great dance of Radha and Krishna from the Gita Govinda. It's a pan-Indian culture. And there, when you speak of Radha and Krishna, Radha Bhakti Harijnanam Tabhyamya cha samanvita Tam Shri Bhagavatim Gatam Vande Yugala Rupini. There is that bhakti and the jnana. So philosophy as merely logic, philosophy as mere argumentation, philosophy as merely normative on certain principles is not the right way at all. but at the same time, looking at art as something to be denounced, that's a very unfortunate thing. It also has happened in India, like elsewhere. The Vaidika said, Kavyalapamshcha varjayet. Give up this Kavyalapa. It is actually distorting. It is taking you away. So also the Buddhists, they shunned. And in the Theravada Buddhism, there is little scope for art. They said, Visukadassana Veramani Sikhapadan Samadhyami. Visukadassana, it's all bad. But that is said here. But that's not taken up by the people. People have their art, and they do practice the philosophy. And art and aesthetics is a way to the understanding. It's one of the ways, one of the major ways of understanding. And therefore, every kala is an upasana.
Thank you, Professor. There is another question by Mr. Benil Biswas, and also there is another remark by Ms. Brahmari Shiv-Prakash. So, Professor Murthy, Benil Biswas has asked, thank you for the evocative lecture, especially the recitation. A quick question is, where this changing ethical stance by Kalidasa, 5th century and Common Era, and Bhavabhuti 8th century Common Era are also a reflection of their times. That is, changing ethical norms under the socio-political scenario and regimes, etc. Thank you again. Do you want me to read it again once again?
I think I get the point. You're saying that all these poets a result of their ages. I should say that great artists all over, they are both the products of their age, and they are the causes of the next age as well, at least at the ideational level. And in fact, to say that the poets are just a product, why only this? There have been many other poets. There have been many other products of their times. There have been mediocre poets, very, very ordinary poets, very stupid poets at all times. But the people also select certain things. And that selection may be right or wrong, we do not know. It's not merely important that Kalidasa belonged to a particular century and he was a product of that and he is relevant only there. He becomes important, and for several centuries, his predecessor Bhasa was forgotten. Bhasa, who was a great challenge to Kalidasa, was forgotten for almost 1,000 years. But he was unearthed. Somewhere he was to be found in the middle of Kerala. He came back, and today he looks more relevant to me. So what Bhasa did to his own times, we really don't know. He was product of which age, we do not know. But today he becomes relevant, and that is where we as Sahridayas, we transcend the time and the space. True, Shakespeare was a product of the Victorian age, right? But is that the end of it all? Has he no impact later? Is he not speaking of an order within the order? Is he not speaking of something which is changing? But just because he said that, did everything change? It doesn't happen so. But the artists have that great luxury of going beyond their time, if they are good poets. And again, good or bad, who decides? We at our times, we have to decide. And so many plays and poems, which 100 years ago they thought was not so good, are now picked up again. Therefore, to say that they are products of an age, they're not just products of that particular age. They are products of a culture which has come down up to their times. So, starting from Vyasa and Valmiki, what has happened has all made its influence on a poet like Kalidasa. He absorbs all that. That's where I said he dissolves all that, like Shiva, into himself and creates a new rhythm, and a new creation comes. And that lasts for a long time. And today, when I look at Kalidasa, I don't see Kalidasa as perhaps his own contemporary connoisseurs did. I need not look at him as a 5th century citizen. I see him as this 2022 citizen in India under this multinational.
Like Kalidasa are contemporary.
Yeah. Yeah. So to say that he's just a product, yeah, of course. But that's where I said he's not just a product, but he is also a great influence. And that is possible because he is able to see that new order. He's not just illustrating the old order. He's not just recommending an old order. He says, yeah, this was the great order, but see what has happened. See where we are leading to.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you. There is, I think, one more question by Ms. Kanchan Gogote. Before that, I would like to read Ms. Brahmari. Ms. Brahmari, would you like to ask or share your remarks directly?
Namaste. Yes, I felt that Sahridayatana with every word you spoke to us today.
Thank you.
Being a performer of classical dance, Bharatanatyam, my works are based on classical nritya as well as the creative application of Natya. So I work in Ekavyakti Nritya Natakas. So the order which you spoke about, the Rita, Rina, Dharma, Karma, and the aesthetical order, and which leads to the ethical order and the vice versa. All these things has really helped me, encouraged me to dwell into my works more deeply, because we have to, when we pick up any poetical work, to experiment or to present it in our classical nritya as well as natya, creative natyas. So we have to develop that Sahridayatana with that poetic work first, and then to all the nadas of the ragas we choose, and that Sahridayatana with that vocal artist and that percussion artist and the costumes we wear, and also the nritya aspects as well as the natya aspects, the dramatic work, and how this aesthetical order and the ethical orders, and how do we have to sense it first as artists, how do we have to sense it first before we present it to the audience and take it towards the audience, how our abhinaya has to communicate.
Yeah. That's very true, Brahmari. I'm very happy you got the point. But I should also mention, when you do the classical dance, we should know that even this classical dance has the same kind of relationship with our folk dance,
Yes.
or the Desi.
Yes.
And even this Desi and Marga, the classical and the non-classical, they should not be seen merely in opposition. Again, there is the chakra, the Desi and the classical, our Kalidasa, Bhavabhuti. Not only Kalidasa and Bhavabhuti, even poets who are less known to our Sanskrit students, maybe Bhattanarayana's Venisamhara, such works, they get into the folk art. Again, they come into a classical text in a local language, And again from there it is taken and put into the folk forms. You see, even there it is that chakra kramana. There is the cyclical movement of this, and there is a growth in it. And today it includes even from even the musical instruments, performing trends from the West, from the Far East, everywhere. All that gets together, forms a new order and a larger order, a bigger order. So giving us again the cosmic view. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Dhanyawad.
Thank you. There is one more question by Miss Kanchan Gogate. Miss Kanchan, would you like to ask it, or may I read it out?
Yeah, I can ask. I just wanted to ask that even these pramanas and all, a lot they have to say in epistemology. But as far as Shabda is concerned, then it has to do with aesthetics as well. We cannot take out. So we don't want to get into these philosophical debates, how far it is capable of conveying knowledge independently or not. But at least can we look at Shabda aesthetically, that is. And a following up question is, now the reader response criticism, which is talking about, but Apaurushaya could be the oldest reader response criticism, could be, I mean, we can look at it that way as well. So
I should say that it's not just the old or the new that matters. It is at which level we are able to see. That's where the Vachyartha is always there for a Shabda. And even that Vachyartha, that means the peripheral meaning. Even there are differences. If I say the word Pankaja, Pankaja means lotus flower, beautiful. But if I go etymologically, it means that which is born in the Nile. So if I say Pankaja, and if it is referring to the birth of a person, then it can mean something bad. But if it is merely the beautiful, the flower, yes, it could be complimenting. Or it could just be the name. Just the name. And all these are the Shabda Vrittis. But in a given context, the way that word is placed, it also has the next level of meaning. And in that level, the Pratiyamana Artha, you have the difference where you see the meaning. You have the Lakshanartha, and within the Lakshanartha, you have Jahal Lakshana, Ajahal Lakshana, Jahal Lakshana, all that discussed in the Vedanta everywhere. But you also have another meaning, which is the Vyanjanartha. There is the Vyanjana Vritti. That Vyanjana Vritti is not accepted by other philosophers. But the Alankarikas, they said, there is that Vyanjana Vritti. There is that Dhvani, which is something very different. And how do you get the Vyanjana Vritti? Only by the Sahdudaya. Whether that meaning is right or wrong, I can see that through my conscience. It's not only that of the person, but of a community, because language belongs to a community. It's not of an individual. So if it is a shared experience amongst a community, then it passes on from time to time. It starts getting many layers of meaning. And when you start focusing your attention on that, new things are revealed. So also, in case of even when it is said Tattvamasi, just by hearing the word Tattvamasi, I don't get the Brahmajnana. Shrotavyo, Mantavyo, Nididhyasitavya. You have to listen, you have to contemplate on that, and then meditate and become one with that. So also in case of poetry, it's not enough that you listen. You will have to focus your attention, make an experience out of that, and that is the aesthetic experience. So this pramana, and in many places, the artistic experience is given as the pramana, wherein it is beyond this mere yes or no category. The Chitraturga Nyaya is given by all the philosophers. What is that Chitraturga Nyaya? you show a picture of a horse and say this is a horse. Is that a horse? Can it do the functions of a horse? No. Then if I say it is not a horse, is it right? Is it not a horse? So there is that understanding which is beyond mere yes and no categories. So even that philosophical discussion has been there even in case of the Pramana.
Thank you, Professor. As the given the time constraints, maybe Ms. Deepanjali, if you have raised your hand, maybe this will be the last question so that we can wind up the session by 3:35.
Okay, thank you, Srini. Thank you, Professor Murthy, for the wonderful lecture. And my question is, I just wish you could elaborate a little bit on what your thoughts are on the idea of text and practice, Shastra and Prayog. And I wanted to ask this question yesterday also to Parul ma'am, but somehow I could not ask it for some reason. So this dynamics between text and practice and the historical precedence of one over another, as also the relevance of Shastras for the practitioners and artists, and what informs what? Like, what is your thought on that?
To elaborate and to be brief is a very difficult task that you gave me. Right, but I tell you, it is the same kind of symbiotic relationship as I've been speaking of other form, that the Shastras make you understand the art, appreciate it. But when they place certain norms, a good practitioner always goes beyond that and finds he will compel the Shastrakaras to give new lakshanas. And that is where Lakshana Granthas are to be written again and again. But they are not the end. Like the grammar, you write the grammar for a language, make it perfect, and people start using it. But again, they go out of that grammar. They create a new order. There is a new language. So every 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you will have to write a new grammar. It happens in case of art also. So grammar again has two levels. Any grammar, Lakshana is grammar. One is giving you the details, saying what these are the norms. But underneath that, there is a greater order to which it has to point out. That is where Panini becomes important. That's where Bharata's Natya Shastra becomes important. That's where the Dhvanyaloka becomes important. Or that's where the Sangeeta Shastra of Shangadeva or somebody becomes important. Second thing is should a practitioner look at the Lakshanas? They do. But great artists always create a new Lakshana. And the Lakshana Shastra will have to be sensitive enough and say, yeah, we create a new order. But sometimes, as it happened in case of Bharata, as it happened in case of Bhasa, they are being rejected. But they survive somewhere. And when it is relevant, they come back to us. So it's again the same kind of dynamics, slightly in a more, what I should say, that of the rules, the ruler and the ruled. The ruled always break the rules, and therefore you will always have to make new rules. You will have to keep making amendments to every kind of constitution that you create.
Thank you, Professor, for your interesting lecture as well as invocative question and answers that you have given. I too had a lot of questions, including the very first one was the question I wanted to ask was, why did you choose the title Poetics and why not Aesthetics? And how would you like to translate the term aesthetics in Sanskrit? And also the point that you spoke of objectivity of beauty and many things
I have not been able to do justice. I have hardly mentioned anything from the books of Poetics. And if I were to go to aesthetics and take to Sangeeta Shastra or Natya Shastra and the other Shastras, Shilpa Shastra, it would be much more difficult. Thank you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Murthy. Thank you, Srini. It was lovely to hear all these lovely stories, sir. And for someone who isn't well versed, it was still enchanting to listen to. Thank you so much.